Welcome to Pesto Comics Audio Edition. This is the entry for March 19th, 2024. Beginning the season. Missing out on Toronto Comicon, some newsletter changes, suffering as a sports fan, and getting some fresh air. Welcome back. It's been an extraordinarily busy couple of weeks, compounded by a trip stateside to catch some hockey last week. Yet again, I had plans that had fallen through entirely. I was supposed to go to Toronto Comicon this past weekend. I didn't make it. I'll get into exactly why. It's actually kind of silly on my part. The good news is the higher priority items on the schedule are going just fine. From Parts Unknown 2, funded with a nice surge at the end that allowed us to hit our stretch goals. This is welcome news as I had already printed the magnets for said stretch goals. I was also able to close out the fulfillment on Big Smoke Pulp Volume 1. It was 81 packages in one trip. I learned a lot about what to do better with Volume 2, which is still on the books, but I'm looking at alternatives to being on the hook for shipping extra heavy 550-page books. I've sent out smoke test surveys for Naked Kaiju Woman this week, with the full surveys ready to go before the end of the week, and digital downloads available once I lock those, likely early next week. Things have been moving along pretty well, even if things like Toronto Comicon fall through the cracks. To that point, project updates. From Parts Unknown number 3 in Prelaunch. I was able to get the pre-launch page for From Parts Unknown number 3 up moments after number 2 funded. Thanks to that, we're already collecting a handful of subscribers. I'd love to get this over 100 before we launch on April 2nd. I'm keeping the goal low for this one, lower than ever really. I want this sucker funded within hours of launching, and to give us a reasonable excuse to hit some big stretch goals. It's a risk as number 2 stalled shortly after it crossed the funded line, but I worry that it also kept it from catching the attention of the Kickstarter algorithm. Consider this an experiment. The most important factor right now is pre-launch followers. Fortunately, that's free for anyone to do. So, if you have a spare moment, give it a follow. Speaking of support, a paid option. To be absolutely clear here, nothing changes with this Wednesday newsletter. You still get it in your inbox every week, including the podcast like this with me reading it out. My goal is not to take anything away from readers of this newsletter. Instead, this includes an extra post, bi-weekly on Saturdays, that would dive deeper into the numbers and the business of it all. I'm pretty open with my postmortems and weekly updates, but I don't share specifics too much when it comes to actual finances and process on projects I'm working on. Being a part of this tier will be where I'll open up a lot more in that regard. With that in mind, I'm offering a 60-day free trial using the link you'll find in the Substack. That's good enough for 4 free paid posts and access to the exclusive subscriber chat. For the Pesto patron tier, I'll send you hard copies of a handful of books and comics to your door, wherever you are, worldwide. This is all in an effort to make ends meet. Making comics is hard, but it's even more expensive. I'm not looking for handouts here. I'm looking to provide you with some great insights and a real look at what this all takes from end to end. The goal of all this being that I can get even more great comics and books out there for everyone to enjoy. I'm not only looking to get paid, I want to give back. With that in mind, I have something new for the other Saturdays where it's not a paid post. Elsewhere in the universe. Those of you who have been subscribed to this newsletter since the very beginning know that I initially had it in 2 separate newsletters. There's the Pesto Comics newsletter you're listening to today, and then there was the Pesto Comics Hyper Edition newsletter that would come out every single day. Keeping a daily newsletter going, with the level of detail and thought I like to put into it, became way too much work. It actually started to trample on all the actual comics and novels I was trying to write, which really defeated the whole point of doing it, so I inevitably shut it down. However, I've been feeling the itch to share the amazing work that's out there. With that in mind, I've decided to start a new subsection of this newsletter called Elsewhere in the Universe. This is another bi-weekly email that'll come out starting this Saturday, hitting your inbox every other Saturday from then on, in between the paid posts, and it's absolutely free. I've also created a podcast feed where I'll be reading it out, just like I do for this newsletter every week. A quick note, if you don't want to receive these extra emails, you can turn them off in the Notifications tab under Manage Subscription. There's also a link in the Substack. I'm very excited to share all the cool comics I've been reading, all the Substacks that inspire me, the movies I've enjoyed, and the novels I can't put down. There's so much great stuff out there, and I want you all to know about it. One more bit of news before we get into it this week. Event updates. East Coast Comic Expo. As far as where I'm tabling this year, this will be the furthest trip I'm making as I find myself in New Brunswick for the first time. It should be a good show based on how friendly and accessible the coordinators have already been. I'm looking forward to the excuse to get out to the Maritimes. It's something I've said I'd do and haven't built up the will to until now. I'm looking forward to this one in June, a week after TCAF. Word on the street. In September, I'll be very close to my former office as I sell my wares on the Queen's Park Circle at the Word on the Street Festival. My goal is to have a couple of books available by the time this hits, which I'll be sharing more about soon, as this is more of a literary festival than a comic one. I won't only be selling those mysterious books, but my usual comics there too. With that, let's get into it. Changing of the seasons. Instead of spending my time on the floor of my first con of the year at Toronto Comicon, I spent time with family and friends. It isn't the worst thing I could have done with my time. It allowed me to recharge my batteries creatively. The best part of it all is it really did feel like spring is finally coming. I know I've been harping on that in this newsletter lately, but this year more than ever, I'm done with winter. I don't know why. Spring is feeling a lot more like a revival. I've made some adjustments to the Pesto Comics release calendar, including combining the campaign of From Parts Unknown number 4 and 5. I've got a new project, starting with a new artist that I'll be announcing in the near future, and another project with an artist that you've seen quite a bit from this year. This isn't even counting the novellas I'm working on. I'm trying to be as prolific as possible, and I'm using the spring as an opportunity, even if it's a silly one, to stay motivated. It's not all perfect, though. Missing out on Toronto Comic Con. I usually like to think I'm a detail-oriented person. Success in my day job relies a lot on that specific quality. It's gotten me pretty far in my career, but I do overlook things here and there, and the admission to Toronto Comic Con is no different. My original plan was to go on Sunday, but as personal matters got in the way, I figured I'd just go on Saturday before I headed out to the Toronto FC game in the afternoon. However, my Fan Expo pass was only good for Friday and Sunday. I discovered this late on Friday, and by then Saturday was well past sold out. This was after telling more than a couple people that I'd swing by their tables to say hi. This makes 2 years in a row that my Fan Expo pass kept me from going to Toronto Comic Con. My goal next year is either to table at Fan Expo or to be a guest at Toronto Comic Con. So here's hoping that I'll have things sorted. If it doesn't go as I hope, at least I know what the rules of engagement are. My next opportunity to get to any kind of convention is going to be the Toronto Indie Authors Conference at the end of April. For comic-specific conventions, it'll be in June at TCAF. It's unfortunate to miss an opportunity to catch up with everyone that I haven't seen since last year, and the FOMO on social media was extra strong as everyone was showing off their tables and taking group photos. I even missed out on an opportunity to hang out with my Instant Ink comic book podcast buddy Roberto Villacava as he was walking the floors and shaking hands with the very same folks. It's unfortunate, but it's my own doing. At least it didn't cost me anything to miss out. Just the opportunity. A sign of a long, frustrating summer, sports-wise. The plans that did stick this weekend was heading to the first game for Toronto FC at BMO Field this season, just to watch them squander an early lead. My brother and I became members at the beginning of the Glory Days in 2016. We were there for the glorious MLS Cup, Voyageurs Cup, and Supporters Shield treble season in 2017. Those days feel like forever ago now. This team seems like they'll be contending for the wooden spoon for the next decade, unless some real big changes are made. Plus, concessions have gone up another 15% to pay for some expensive players that didn't quite pan out. I'll still be there for every home game, and it looks like it's going to be pretty frustrating to do so. But I'm here for the long haul. It's not just an attitude I take in my writing or producing comics, but anything I care about. At the very least, it's a good reason to hang out with my brother semi-regularly. Looking ahead to 2025. It's hard to ignore the news. There's only so much that can be done, especially from where I'm sitting in Canada. The only way to feel better about it is to focus on things I can control. I'm writing more than ever this year. Not just comics, but novels, novellas, short stories, and now extra newsletter posts. I can only fund so many artists at a time to get comics out, but I have so many stories to tell, and only so much time in my life that I have to do it in. My plan is to make the most of it. I want to share it all with you. Not just the end result, but the journey. I'm glad you're here with me every week. For those that can't afford it, I'm excited to share even more with you every other Saturday. I'm equally as excited to share all the other cool stuff that I've been reading and experiencing out there. I don't have enough cash to support every project that catches my eye. So if I can get them in front of people who might be able to, I'm happy to do it. As far as the wider world goes, the news is important and informative, but at the same time, putting too much time into it doesn't pay dividends. Putting time into things that you enjoy, spending it with people that lift you up, and trying to give back is what matters more than anything, especially now. Until next time. Coming up on the Substacks, Saturday, March 22nd, the first entry of Elsewhere in the Universe, Greetings from Elsewhere. We'll talk about Mickey 17, R.I.P. Marvel, some life drawings, and so many Kickstarter projects. And on Wednesday, March 26th, the usual Pesto Comics entry, Schedule Congestion, having so much to release and not enough weeks to do it. And then on Saturday, March 29th, the first paid entry, You're a Superstar, the first paid newsletter. And April 2nd, Round 3 from Parts Unknown, back before you could miss it. And as far as where I'll be appearing this year, I mentioned it in the preamble. I got into both East Coast Comic Expo and Word on the Street. And ahead of that all is TCAF this year. I'm still on the waitlist for Montreal, Ottawa, and Fan Expo Canada. And what's coming up the soonest is the Toronto Indie Authors Conference. I'm still waiting for tickets to go on sale to New York, and I'm still very much a maybe on Author Nation. Given how well the dollar's doing, I'm having a hard time justifying the cost to just attend Author Nation. And given I don't have too many books ready to go, I might postpone this till the following year. But New York Comicon is one I really do want to target. If anything, it might just be that. We'll have to see, but I'm leaving it up on the schedule for now. And speaking of schedules, the Pesto Comics release calendar. I mentioned From Parts Unknown number 3 is now on pre-launch. If you haven't followed it, please do so. That will run throughout the month of April. And then 3 weeks later in May, we end the series with From Parts Unknown number 4 and 5, doing a double shipping issue to get everyone the wonderful ending. Although there's a great cliffhanger at the end of 4, I don't want you to wait too long. I want to get everybody on board with this comic so that we can really launch it and get everyone excited for it. So hopefully everyone gets on board and really enjoys this one. And then in July, I'm in the midst of writing a novella for the Heartstrings and Hardbacks event on Kickstarter, so that'll be a lot of fun. It's romance, but there's a lot of a sci-fi bent in it. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And then I'm also working on a secret novella series that's a little more sci-fi as well. That'll go straight to Kindle Unlimited to start, and it'll be available for at least 90 days. And it'll be available on there for a little while before we collect it in the new year. So lots on the schedule. I could keep going, but I'll spare you for now. Make sure you take a look at the Substack if you want to see more. And this week on the Instant Ink Comic Book Podcast, we have Philip Tarl Dennison. He's a lot of fun. He's doing so much work on the screenwriting side and really diving into the comics too. He's really taking a business-minded approach to all of it, and I really do appreciate that. He has a very interesting, creative mind in how he approaches the business, and it does make a lot of sense. And it's pretty interesting what he's doing. Plus, the page we put together is one of the most bizarre and interesting ones we've had in a while. So it's well worth checking out. You can find that on YouTube, Spotify, and elsewhere. If you're ever concerned about sitting and having to watch, I do recommend you can just listen to it and then check out the page after on our website. It's a great way to experience it, as the conversation is really what's important on the podcast, and then checking out the art afterwards. If you want art process, absolutely check out the video. You can see Roberto drawing it live. But if you just want to see the end result after hearing the great conversation, that's a great way to experience it too. This way you can experience it on your drive and then see what we were talking about in the end. But you do you, whatever works. And with that, I want to thank you. This is a little bit of a different post in the way that it was mostly me just selling all the new things I'm trying to do. As I mentioned, I'm using spring as a refresh to refocus a bit. It's been an up and down year in a way, with the heights of Naked Kaiju Woman and then the kind of subdued nature of From Parts Unknown. It's been an interesting go at it. Number 2 did at least exceed some expectations that it did hit the stretch goals, but it's still not a profitable book, where Naked Kaiju Woman actually cleared that line and is the proper profitable book. So in order to make these books happen and to keep doing it without having to constantly stretch my finances to do, I'm looking for new alternatives in order to get this done. And that's why we have this paid tier. And with this, I don't want to just ask for money. I'm not looking for handouts. I'm not looking for just an excuse to bring money in. what I want to do is I want to share a lot more. And frankly, I don't feel comfortable just having that posted for the world to see. It's more about people who are interested and really do want to dig deep into the numbers and into the background of things and would appreciate a preview of where we are with process and early drafts of things and just keeping an eye on all the things going on with Pesto Comics. So I feel like those that are willing to shell out even a little bit, as I'm keeping the cost, frankly, very low relative to a lot of Substacks out there. But for those that are willing to put in that extra effort, I want to reward you with the behind the scenes of all the things that's going on. And if I'm being completely honest, it'll also help keep me on task and keep me on top of everything. So it's mutually beneficial. But if I'm being entirely honest as a business person, it's really important to try to find some extra revenue streams because I can't keep doing this if it's constantly in the red. So here's another way to try and get things at least to a break-even point. But as always, I'm in this for the long haul. I understand the whole concept of the long tail. I'm seeing it with my own projects where the more I put out there, the more the audience grows, and I seem to be able to launch and have a very good sense that things will fund, even if it's something that's a little more niche, like from Parts Unknown. But yeah, so I'm going to keep experimenting. I'm going to keep trying things. I want you to be along for the ride, and I think the paid tier is the best way to do that. And then there's the elsewhere in the universe side of things. One thing I always feel awful about is that I don't share as much as I could. I know that there's all these amazing projects. I back a lot of these projects. I'm about 6 projects shy of 1,000 projects backed on Kickstarter. That's not even counting the stuff I've supported on Zoop, plus my weekly trip to the LCS. I'm spending a lot on comics, basically. I also collect a ton of books and novels that I'm constantly reading, not counting the stuff that I have on hold at the library that I'm picking up as soon as they're available. So I'm reading constantly. I'm not as up to date on all the TV shows and movies, but I try to be. There's just a lot going on that I'd love to share what's great out there. It's easy to pick on stuff and say what's not working, but I want to share what's really good and what I'm enjoying. And though it may not be the latest and greatest every time, I may be behind in a lot of cases, I really want to share that with you. That includes other Substacks as well. There's a lot of great Substacks. I'm a part of this ecosystem, and I really do want to share and say, hey, there's other people doing some amazing things out there. That's where elsewhere in the universe comes from. So lots of cool projects that I'm really trying to get off the ground. I also mentioned that there's a few things that I haven't announced yet. I think that's something that I'll be able to share in the paid tier because I'll be a little more open about things in terms of if they don't work out, if they don't go as planned, if I have to push it, if I have to cancel it. I'm happy to share where I am with that in a more of a closed and friendly environment. So we'll see how that goes. But with all that said, I really do appreciate you being here. We'll talk again on Friday with Elsewhere in the Universe, or I'll talk to you again next week. So I really do appreciate you being here. It means the world. Thanks again. Talk to you next time.